Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give it a few minutes, wait for the number of participants we've got to go up. I can see it steadily climbing, and then we'll make a start in about a minute. Okay, we've got to 52 participants, so we'll make a start in the interests of time. So good morning and welcome everyone to this morning's webinar. My name's Catherine Whitfield. I am Vice Chair of ITS UK, and I'm also Technical Director at WSP. And today's webinar is going to explore the role of artificial intelligence, specifically in transport planning. So we're going to see some live demonstrations, some of the latest AI technologies. We're going to update attendees on the latest developments in AI, and we're also going to look at how those technologies might affect transport planners. And I think it's probably worth saying that it's rare that I've ever been involved in something so timely as today's webinar. I'm sure you were all glued to your screens and your laptops yesterday as the Prime Minister announced the government's response to the AI Opportunity Action Plan. And as I read through the plan and the government's response to it, a few things really stood out to me. Firstly, that the UK is the third largest AI market in the world, and behind only China and the UK, which is, I think, a ranking we've not seen since probably the 2012 Olympics. Secondly, the AlphaFold, which is an AI system developed by Google DeepMind, and not a Bond villain, as I thought it might be. That's an AI machine that predicts protein structures, and it's estimated to have already saved the equivalent of 400 million years of research time, which is just mind-blowing. And finally, the adoption of AI could grow the UK economy by an additional 400 billion by only 2030. So that's only 5-6 years away. So yeah, that's quite mind-blowing. So we're going to go through the presentations. We do have some questions and answers. Please put as many questions and answers as you can. Please put them in the Q&A channel rather than the chat, and that's easier for us to tag them. And also, just before we start the webinar, you'll see on screen at the moment there is a discount code available for the Transport AI conference that's being held in Manchester on the 5th of February. It's the second year the conference is going to happen. I attended last year and genuinely thought it was one of the best that I'd been to. Really accessible, really easy to understand, lots of interesting debate, and I'm sure this year will be even better with the recent announcements. So yeah, with no further ado, I will hand over. We've got 3 speakers today: Andrew Browning from SchemeFlow, Robin Workman from TRL, and finally Andy Graham. So yes, I will hand over to Andrew.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar this morning. My name is Andrew Browning. I'm the founder and chief executive of a small British startup called SchemeFlow. In my previous life, I was chief of staff to the Mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street. So I've seen a little bit of the transport world, and I'm now living in the AI world. And in fact, last summer, I spent 3 months in San Francisco as part of an accelerator there, seeing what the other tech companies are doing with AI. And it's a really exciting time. So we're going to do 3 things today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what do we actually mean by AI and what's all the fuss about recently. Then I'm going to go through 3 very, very practical examples of how you can use AI tools that are out there, free tools for anyone to use in your daily work, starting today. And then finally, I'll leave you with a thought of some pieces of advice as we go on through AI. What might you want to do, might you want to think about in your own career and your own work? So without further ado, let me introduce Margot Robbie. Margot Robbie is here to tell you the best news of the morning, which is that you've all been using artificial intelligence already for about the last 10 or 15 years. What you see at the bottom of the screen is the autocomplete function of a Google search. It's the same as the autocomplete function on your phone. And effectively, what the technology is doing is it is guessing what are the most likely next words in a sequence of words. Now, this is one form of artificial intelligence. You might have heard talk about large language models, one specific type of artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence is actually a sort of family of different technologies. And we're going to hear from Andy and Robin later about some of the other types of uses of artificial intelligence. But I would say it's not something to be scared of. You've been using this technology. And the big changes that we've seen in the last couple of years are, firstly, that this has moved from being a closed technology where you have to be Google or Netflix or Amazon to make use of it, and you have to hire $20 million worth of statistics PhDs to use this technology, to being open and something that any of you can log on this afternoon for free and use ChatGPT yourself. It's gone from being a closed technology to being an open technology. And behind the scenes, what's been happening is, of course, the cost of computer processing, and it's very resource intensive in terms of processing, that cost has gone down and down and down. And the amount of data available to feed the artificial intelligence has gone up and up and up. So there are lots of things that are going on, but what's happened in the last couple of years, I think the biggest thing has been this move from sort of closed proprietary trade secret type technology to open technology, which can be used by anyone. And where if you're a 4-person British startup like us, you can plug in to the latest AI models. And for a tiny fraction of a cent every time I use it financially, I can plug it into my own startup software. So that's what's been going on. You should be able to see 2 videos on screen. On the left-hand side, you've got a video which was generated using artificial intelligence in 2023. It's the actor Will Smith eating spaghetti. And if you have a look at that, it's a little bit strange. The AI hasn't quite got the imagery correct. The spaghetti is sort of falling all over his face, and it's a little bit strange. 2023, year and a half ago. On the right-hand side, you should be able to see some rather adorable golden retriever puppies playing in the snow. This is also generated using AI. And the improvement in sort of the resolution and the quality of the video there is really quite striking. So I always show this slide to talk about the pace at which this artificial intelligence technology is moving at. To go in less than a year from Will Smith eating spaghetti to the quality of those puppies playing in the snow is really quite remarkable. What's it going to be like in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years time? Incredible. So this is Sam Altman. He's the founder of OpenAI, which is the company that that invented ChatGPT. He's sort of one of the big figures in AI in Silicon Valley. It's going to eliminate a lot of jobs. Lots of people worried about this. And some classes of jobs will go away entirely, he says. But he also says it's going to create entirely new jobs, and it's going to change the way we all do our jobs. So whatever you think is going to happen, clearly this technology is going to have a big, big impact over the next 10 years for the UK, for the world. And I love showing this photograph. I think it's from the early 60s. This is a drafting room. I think it could be an architect's studio. It could be an engineer's drafting room. We have seen some of this type of change before. So if you think of CAD or if you think of GIS software, the change in jobs, in roles, and in working patterns in our type of work has already, within our lifetimes, changed once. And I think we're likely to see similarly significant changes in the next few years. So there's a brief introduction. Let's do some AI. The first thing I'm going to show you is a tool called Perplexity. And this tool has been developed by a relatively small company relatively recently, and it uses AI to do research online. Effectively, it's very useful as a research tool. So what we're going to do, first of all, I'm going to show you what we do today. So let's take Google. We're going to have a little task. Let's say we're a transport consultancy and we want to know what one of our competitors has been winning in terms of work. So we're going to ask Google, what local authority transport projects has AECOM won recently in the northwest of England? Put it into Google and let's have a look. Okay, well, we've got a couple of links to the AECOM website here. Something about Greater Manchester. Oh, something about Mid Cornwall here. Slightly strange. Scrolling down here. Berkhamsted and Trim, also slightly strange here. So already with Google, and we'll come on to the reliability of AI at the moment, we're perfectly used to triaging ourselves the results of a Google search, for example. Let's have a look if we put that same query into Perplexity. So this is Perplexity. You go perplexity.ai, create a free account. You can use this for free this afternoon. And effectively, it's got a search the same as Google. We're going to put this in here. What local authority transport projects has AECOM won recently? And first of all, you see the sources start to come up here. And then we start to see some projects listed out. Okay, well, at least these geographically are a little bit more accurate than the previous version here. Let's ask Perplexity to give us a table. Create a table of these projects by format, name of project, and you can define the format in which you'd like that information. Let's have a look. The estimated cost of the projects as well. So you can start to see, this is a pretty useful piece of work. In fact, this is something that if you gave this to a second-year graduate, they could spend half a day doing this particular piece of work, and the AI has done it almost straight away. So then let's have, quick example of Perplexity and how you might quickly and easily use that. You might copy that, use that in your own work. But what you can see is it doesn't answer the full question here. So it doesn't answer, okay, how do I go and make an approach to work on these projects with AECOM, or how do I win projects in the future? But it is a useful research tool here. So that's Perplexity. Let's have another example. One of the other things the new AI language tools are good at are reading and summarizing PDFs. So we're going to go to a tool called Notebook LM. This is a tool which Google's released. And what we're going to do is create a new notebook. And I'm going to upload for you a couple of PDF documents, which are the West Midlands local transport plan from 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm just uploading those here, and we're going to be able to question those PDF documents for some information, and the AI will help us to digest them. So let's have a look. We've uploaded those documents. It's pulled out sort of something here, slightly, let's see whether that's right, 2026. Let's get it to just summarize what these documents are to start with. Okay, so it's told us it's the combined authority local transport plan there. And then let's ask it to pull out from those PDFs a list of the projects that are coming up in the West Midlands. So here we go. Create a table of the future transport capital projects. And let's see if it can do the same as Perplexity. Okay, so what we can see here is it is starting to pull out some projects here. Not very many, actually. I'd expect there to be a few more. And what you can do with these things is, because of this chat interface, you can ask follow-ups and you can sort of keep querying the information until you get what you want. Let's say we want to find out, though, who do I need to talk to about supporting these projects? I want to work with the TFWM or the WMCA. Let's have a look and see what it can say. Well, I asked for people, and it's given me a very strange answer of who the Mayor of the West Midlands is. So this is a really good example of user beware. You're really going to have to still check some of the outputs of these AI AI models. Andy Maybury, I have never heard of. Andy Street was the mayor of the West Midlands in May 2017. So it's slightly strange. And what you'll find is for things where you sort of vaguely know the answers, it's easy for you as a human being to check it. Where it's something that you really don't know. If I had done this for Cornwall, for example, where I don't know the patch, it would have been very difficult for me to check it. And so sometimes there's a trade-off of how much time it saves versus how much time you need to spend checking it. So it's giving me some summaries there, but it's really not giving me people. Let's have a look if it will give me any more information on that. Give me the name of senior people I can talk to. And what's interesting here is, remember, this is reading those two PDFs that we ingested. So it comes back and it says effectively, I can't provide you contact details because we're not doing that. So again, part of this is about using the right tools for the right things. You might want to use Perplexity for doing online research, finding names, for example. You might want to use Notebook LM for reading some PDFs. So another quick example there. Now, let's go to ChatGPT. You may have heard of. I hope you've all had a play with it. If you haven't, I would strongly urge you to do so. The easiest way to get a feel for what this technology can and can't do is by playing with it. It's free. It takes 5 minutes to set up an account. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little look at a road close to where I live in London. And what I've done, I've just uploaded a picture from Street View of the road there. And I'm going to ask ChatGPT to list out the road conditions, number of lanes, and so on of the road. Let's have a look what it can do. So interesting. It has started to list quite a lot of information. So AI is not just about text. You saw the videos generated earlier. You see the way that AI can start to interact with images as well. So that's fascinating. But let's do something useful with that information. Let's say we're writing a transport statement for a planning application. This road is adjacent to the site. Please draft me a paragraph. And what we can see is it's quickly written me a paragraph. Bit of waffle there. Let's say shorten it a bit. And hopefully we'll get something that we need. Fascinatingly, it doesn't say anywhere on that image, Finchley Road. It says the A41, doesn't say the Finchley Road. The AI has worked out, based on its knowledge and its training on the internet, that this is the Finchley Road in North London. So very quickly, we can get to something that's pretty passable. You might not write it exactly like that. You might want to tweak it and play with it. But you can see very quickly how some of these free tools can give you a very good, quick view of some research that you want to do, analyzing some images, reading some PDFs, researching online. So there we have it, 3 live demos. Looking forward to the questions on the practicalities of those. And what I'm going to do after this, actually, I'll do a little blog post with the links to all of these and how to sign up if you want to use them. And I'd really encourage you to try them out for yourselves. So some examples there. 1, 2, 3. Now, before this webinar, when you signed up, you were asked to name a person that you would like AI to help you meet from the history of transport planning. And here are the results. So you can see Brunel, Amelia Earhart is there. The Wright brothers, I think, are there. Stevenson's, there are a few slightly strange names. Tom Van Vuren came up, who I think would be flattered to know that he was on the same level as all these other people here. And what we've done, just for a bit of fun, is we have created an image, and you can see what the AI has done. So it's taken those names. I prompted it to take that list of names and turn it into a sort of collage image here. There, and you can see Amelia Earhart there. You can see her plane. For some reason, she's wearing Neil Armstrong's spacesuit, it appears. So you can see how the AI, in really strange ways, is synthesizing those ideas, those semantic ideas, and turning them into an image here. Really fascinating. So back to reality. How are people today using AI in their companies? We work with a lot of transport consulting companies in the UK, and this is my summary kind of view of where people are up to. So on the left-hand side, you go from kind of solo one-man band type organizations right up to large companies. And typically, the larger you are, the more mature on this sort of spectrum you are. Lots of people you can see in this mid-section of kind of informal experimentation, doing testing at a firm-wide level. Some people have pushed it further and are really operationalizing and using AI, but not that many. And particularly beyond the sort of largest firms, not that many as well. And then some folks are going, of course, onto the very highly sophisticated end of creating their own AI tools, but most people are not. So don't worry, it's not just you sort of know AI, thinking about this, experimenting with this. Everybody's on this journey and trying to work out what are the places I can use this in my organization and where is it too much effort to make sense. Some more examples of the types of things people are doing with AI. So lots of the time, actually, you'll have existing tools which will say there is a new AI feature. So you've got Microsoft Teams. You can tag on to Microsoft Teams Copilot, which is very similar to ChatGPT that we've just seen, can write things for you, draft things for you. Some software companies and startups are doing really deep insight, and I think we're going to see some examples of that in the later presentations. This could be doing image analysis, doing traffic counts, really getting into data sources very deeply and getting new insights for your work. We do a bit of work in kind of report writing, but people are using it for bids, for proposals, and lots of people are simply using ChatGPT for that, actually, to speed up their work. New capabilities, this is fascinating. The government, actually, the government number 10 unit, a couple of years ago, built a tool to analyze consultation responses and summarize those very quickly and very easily. There's a brilliant tool in the US for optimizing car park layouts called TestFit, which I would recommend having a look at. Fascinating. Better Streets AI does sort of AI renders of street scenes to do placemaking with. So all sorts of different use cases here. But as you can see, I mean, these sort of orange balls are supposed to suggest not everybody's doing this. People are trying things, people are testing, people are seeing what works at this stage. So you've got a choice to make, really. I think personally in your career and for your organization, where do you want to be on the ostrich picture? Some of these ostriches are racing off to the left-hand side, really going fast, really going after the opportunities of AI. At the other end of the spectrum, some people are burying their heads in the sand and saying, oh, I've been doing this for 40 years and I don't want to change. Fine. And then there are some others who are sort of in the middle, testing, going cautiously and seeing what can be useful, seeing what can't be used. So you've got a bit of a decision. What sort of positioning do you want to take there? So 3 tips for you. Firstly, I really would say keep up on top of AI developments. Work out the way that's easiest for you to do that. Sign up to an email newsletter, follow a few people on Twitter, go to the right conferences, read the right industry journals. Just keep an eye. This is going to move really fast, and it's really worth you keeping up to date with what's going on. The second thing it's worth saying is, however good AI gets, those human skills that you use in your job are not going anywhere. In fact, they're probably getting even more important. So this is supposed to be, I think, a transport consultant cuddling a property developer here, basically, and clients. But the idea is all those stakeholder and relationship skills that you have, even more important than ever. So really work on building those up, practicing them, and making them into your competitive advantage in the future. And finally, one of the best ways to keep on top of this stuff is take a trial of these new tools as they're released. Some of them will be bad, some of them will be good, but actually for like a relatively small amount of time, it's quite a good way to get a feel for what is working, what's not working. So 3 tips for you there. The final thing I should say is I showed you 3 very general use cases and generic AI tools today. If you want to see tailored to transport planning use cases and software tools, you have got to come to the Transport AI conference. You will see a whole range of different companies and organizations doing really exciting things with AI. So I'd say today has just been a little taster of what you can do. Really worth going and getting stuck in and seeing what is going on in transport planning today. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrew, for that fascinating presentation. Lots of interesting things to get our teeth into there during the Q&A session. Just a reminder then that if you do have any questions and answers, we've already had quite a few coming in, which is great. Please post it in the Q&A chat. So now we'll hand over to Robin Workman from TRL next. Thank you, Robin.
Thanks very much, Catherine. So yeah, my name's Robin Workman. I work for TRL, and I'm leading a project that we're doing that was funded by Department for Transport, and that's about barriers to AI adoption in transport. And we'll be having a workshop. I'll talk a little bit later about at the Transport AI 2025 conference. So the aim of that of the project is to identify and get some insights on the barriers that exist to AI in transport and how to address those, prioritize those barriers, find some case studies if possible, and then find hopefully potentially some solutions to those barriers. You have the next slide, please. Thanks. So yeah, AI is becoming an essential part of our life, as Andrew very interestingly showed there, and transport, I think, is no exception to that, and actually there's a lot of potential for that. As we learned from the government, this is also very keen on integrating AI into how we do transport and transport planning. There's lots of potential, I think, to improve efficiency, safety, sustainability, but those barriers are there, and they limit the full potential of AI integration. So, on the project, what have we delivered so far? So we've done a literature review to identify and those barriers and help to prioritize them. Sorry, just shut down. And shortlist those barriers, and then we've had a stakeholder workshop with some key people from across the sector to confirm and prioritize what those barriers are, and we'll be having this workshop at Transport AI to gather insights into investigating those barriers in more detail. Next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, so the way we approached this was to do an evidence review. We conducted a structured literature research using key terms, and I believe we probably use some AI in doing this as well. So terms like AI in transport, data governance, skills gaps in AI and transport infrastructure challenges, etc. And this is covering the whole of transport, so road, rail, maritime, and aviation. But we are concentrating for the moment on road and rail. Some of the sources we found were obviously academic research. There's plenty of articles and peer-reviewed articles on AI and how it's used in transport. There's DFD have done some work already on this, and most specifically around tables in transport, and then industry reports as well on data strategy, etc. Can I have the next slide, please? Thanks. So from the reports from the literature we found, we've grouped those barriers that we've found so far. There's 12 barriers altogether. We've grouped them into four sort of themes, general themes. So firstly, there's technological barriers. So that's challenges related to infrastructure, data quality, standardization, etc. Then there's organizational barriers. So that could be issues with governance, skills in the workforce, capacity, and leadership. And then there's societal, economic, and environmental barriers. So around perhaps funding, environmental impact, public trust, etc. And then there were other barriers, and we've sort of synthesized those into one main barrier at the end there. Next slide, please. I'll go into in a bit more detail now, just to give you an idea of the barriers that we'll be addressing in the workshop in February. So the technological barriers included data discoverability and accessibility. So quite often you find that the data is scattered across different systems. Different organizations manage different aspects of the data, and it can be stored in different formats. And that makes it more difficult for AI applications to give a consistent output. So that limits the access to critical data, and that's one of the key barriers we found. The next one is really linked to that. It's possible there may be poor quality data or inconsistent data, and that obviously would limit AI's ability to deliver the results in an accurate and reliable way. And I think, as Andrew demonstrated there quite clearly, that it still needs a significant amount of checking. So that sort of limits the AI, and then also the varying standards of data make it difficult to integrate across different modes. So and the third one in this group was the transport infrastructure. At the moment, often lacks the capacity to support advanced AI applications, such as, for an example given here is real-time communication for autonomous vehicles. Next slide, please. So the next group was organizational barriers. So I think with the speed that AI is moving, it's difficult for regulations and legislation to keep up. So we've got here the outdated regulations, but I think that's really a consequence of the AI moving so quickly that it's difficult for governments to keep up. Skills and workforce readiness, so that's a capacity issue again, because things move quickly. It's difficult to get the expertise into organisations that can really maximise the use of that AI, and the barriers is to prevent successful implementation of those systems. And then very closely linked to that is that the AI awareness of decision makers, so limiting their ability to make those decisions. A more sort of human one is perhaps resistance to change. So and I think this is one thing that was again sort of came up a bit in the government's helpers this week, is that there's fears of the AI will lose, cause loss of jobs, but again, as Andrew demonstrated, it will quite likely to create new jobs in different areas, in different skills. So, but quite understandably, people have a fear of that. So that could be a potential a barrier to the AI and the understanding of the benefits of AI. The next slide, please. So our next group is societal, economic, and environmental barriers. So again, public trust of AI. I think as AI becomes more accurate, more reliable, that will improve. But potentially it's a barrier at the moment, resisting adoption of AI. There are costs to AI, but there are also benefits in reducing costs. So in the short term, it could create barriers, especially for public authorities. And in terms of environment, that AI can enhance sustainability, but in the same way, it consumes energy. So again, you've got that sort of competing benefits there. So the environmental impacts, the risk is that they might be overlooked. And then the last one here is digital divide. So inequitable access to digital infrastructure and technologies that can be increased disparity between urban and rural areas, for example, and across different socioeconomic groups. Next slide, please. And the last group we had a few other barriers, but the most significant one we found for this was really collaboration between different sectors or different types of levels. So the moment, again, perhaps because it's quite new and because it's groundbreaking all the time, there may be a limited collaboration between academia, industry, policymakers, etc. which could lead to fragmented approaches and slow the innovation of AI in transport. So that's the last barrier that we'll be looking at. Next slide, please. Okay, so coming on to the workshop, Transport AI. So we're going to be convening the graphene suite, and we'll be looking at the barriers that were discussed with stakeholders and prioritised. We'll try and explore those in a bit more depth to understand how they affect transport, and we'll also be trying to identify some potential solutions to remove or mitigate those barriers, and really unlock the full potential of AI in the transport sector. Some of the things we've got here: discover insights from DFT funded research, sharing experience, and hopefully this will lead to shaping the future of DFT policy in AI, identify actionable solutions for removing barriers, and then next slide, please. So yeah, if you have any questions, obviously we've got the Q&A session. By all means, put some questions in there, or you can contact me directly on these contacts here. Next slide, please. Then I think the last one is the invite to the conference. So DFT are hoping to fund a few places for this from local authorities. You can apply on this particular link. We'd like to people to apply. We're looking for a range of applications, people from across the sector to be involved in this workshop that we're holding at the conference. So please apply, and we'll let you know within a couple of days, hopefully, that you've been successful for this. And we're really looking forward to liaising with everyone on this subject. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Robin. So yeah, I'm sure after the event that Juliana will be sending out more links, so you'll be able to get an opportunity to sign up and use that link afterwards as well. Okay, our third and final speaker is Andy Graham. Andy's representing the Transport Technology Forum today and will, I'm sure, add his usual level of pragmatism to the discussions so far. So Andy, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. Have to go with the next slide, please. So I'm Andy Graham. I wear a number of hats. Today I'm working for the Transport Technology Forum, which aims to help local authorities in particular understand some of the new technology that's coming our way. I'm also a trustee of the Reece Jeffreys Road Fund, and we've made some funding available for training in AI, which I've put a link in. And I'm also the chair of the technical committee for the World Congress that's coming to Birmingham in 2027. I'm sure AI will feature in that. So if we have the next slide. So although this is titled about transport planning, from my point of view, the lines between transport planning, transport management, transport optimization are all blurring. And also AI is very much in the news. But I thought it was worth focusing on the AI in transport bit. And as we've heard earlier from Andrew, there's a range of large language models that are allowing you to converse with systems, but also with the power of knowledge. But I'm going to focus very much more on the kind of optimization of transport systems, in other words, using data to make them work better. And that's either in slow time, which you could call planning, or fast time, which you could call transport management. But as I say, they're all a bit swirled up. We already use AI quite a lot for optimizing. We just don't necessarily call it AI. So some examples, there's a company called Eloy that does some work in route optimization and parking. There's a company called Simplify that does a lot of work looking at the next generation of traffic signals using AI. I didn't put on here that Alkira is doing some really interesting work with buses and the bus open data service. You'll have seen in the news AccuSense's mobile phone detecting safety cameras that are all enabled AI. There's a company called Valoran that's using AI to predict collisions, and a company that I'm working with called Vsauce that uses data from the SOS ecosystem to look at collisions. And in the news yesterday, the Prime Minister announced that we'd be using pothole detection from cameras. Well, there's been lots of that work being done over the past, depending on whether it's an in-vehicle camera or the camera on your smartphone, or many other sources of data for detecting potholes. Add to that. So I thought I'd just ask ChatGPT, as we heard earlier on, about what the main use for AI in traffic was, and it suggested that AI can process data from sensors and GPS to monitor traffic and predict congestion, and it can adjust traffic signals in real time. Now, I've been around for a few years, as you can tell from the grey hair, and I thought, well, hang on, I've been doing that for quite some time. So I asked it also, when was Scoot first used, which many of you know is a traffic signal system that adjusts traffic signals in real time. And it's 51 years ago. So again, you just need to be a bit careful sometimes with some of the questions that you ask, because it doesn't necessarily have the full detail and full context. And that's not to say that the AI traffic signal systems that people are working on aren't improvements on what was done in 1974, but many of the principles of prediction, big data, etc., have been used. And the other thing I've noticed a lot in our world is that people come up with AI as a solution for a problem that doesn't really yet exist, or one that's already been done, as I just mentioned. And there is a tendency for us all to put AI in our solutions because it means that we can probably charge a bit more, and we sound a bit more, tomorrow's worldsy. I haven't done anything about large language models because Andrew covered that far better and far more usefully than I could. There are lots of statistics about how much time it can save and so on and so forth. Again, I think Andrew summed that up far better than me. So if we can have the next slide. So I thought, well, I really sort of did a quick Google of myself on ChatGPT, and it tells me that I'm a company that focuses on optimization of transport operations. So I thought, well, if I've done so much work about that sort of thing, and ChatGPT knows about it, then maybe that's the thing I should focus on. One of my colleagues, Charlie Houston, ran a big process using AI tools of everything I've ever written on LinkedIn, everything I've ever published, and everything I've ever done in terms of professional career, and wrote a book for me on what my thoughts were on transport. And it was quite scary in that it adopted my style, it adopted my thinking. It got a few facts wrong here and there, but it was pretty impressive, and it sort of saved me doing it myself. So again, a good example there with real life examples. So next slide, please. Now, many of you will expect me to say this, but the thing that I keep banging the drum on is that we can't really use AI properly unless it's got good data. By good data, I mean good quality, I mean good availability, I mean good accessibility, all the sort of barriers that Robin mentioned in his earlier slide. And lots of people talk about big data and by having big files. And what they really mean is that they take a big spreadsheet with lots of rows and columns. What we actually mean by big data is to mash and mangle lots of different sources together and get a much better picture. And what I'd like to try and alert you to is that there are lots and lots of new data sources and varied sensors in things that move around. We call it transport. And those tend to be vehicles of all different types. And I'll give you some examples of that. There's this thing that generates all sorts of things and brings me up in the middle of a webinar. There are people themselves now giving data, as we know. And at this point, people say, oh, how about cycles and e-scooters and so on? I just mentioned that, and I'll show you some examples later on. So one of the things I'm going to sort of major on in my talk is the idea that there are connected vehicles and other data sources that are reflecting the arrow that Andrew showed earlier on, the volumes of data and their costs are increasing. So if I could have the next slide. So I'd like you to remember three things, really. One is that connected vehicles aren't just new ones, and that picture on the right-hand side is the three oldest connected vehicle in the world. I did the London to Brighton veteran car run, and I connected those three cars together. A 125-year-old car talked to a 124-year-old car, produced data, read road signs, did all the sort of tech stuff that we do. Sorry, those of you who've seen that picture before, but they're still the oldest connected vehicles until somebody beats that. The picture below that is me scooting a foot scooter around the Le Mans racetrack with a load of sensors provided by a company called C-Sense that gave me not just my position, but also detected some harsh pothole events. I did that for sponsorship, and I got to raise some money for charity, and it poured down with rain, which is why I look very wet. I just the whole point that says, I'm not just a petrol head, not just thinking about cars, I also think about data from other things. And the other thing is that we tend to think of connected and autonomous vehicles, and I like to think about connected and autonomous vehicles as being slightly separate. So connected vehicles can be driven by humans, as we know. So the point there is that good data, as I define it, can come from a vehicle to help AI, to help operators, and if you use the data in slow time planning. And AI-derived information can be fed back into a vehicle to reduce delays, improve safety, and I could give you loads of examples of those, but I'm short on time. So maybe the next slide. The company that I work with called Vsauce, we've been using AI to filter false alarms from the e-call system. So if you're getting a car that's built since 2018, about here, there'll be an SOS button. If you press it, it will connect you to the emergency services, but many people don't know that if your airbag goes off, it makes that call automatically. It's passes the location of the vehicle, a load of data. What happens, of course, is that people try and change the mirror or put the light on and they press the button by mistake and they misuse the button. So we work with the TII in Ireland, Transport Information Infrastructure Ireland, and they kindly let us have all of their eCall data for a few years, which we processed and snapped to road networks, and we removed false alarms. A good source of false alarms being car dealers, where people get into a brand new car and they press the button to find out what it does, because nobody read the 538-page manual about what the thing was. So we process those, we take the false alarms, we find out where false alarms occur, and we improve the quality of the data. And what we can do with that is to turn the blob of data that was sent by the car into its make and model. We can tell you, for example, where the vehicle was on the network. So we're working with TII in Ireland for that as a safety aspect, and AI allows us to improve the quality of the data. So next one, please. So there's three things that are not necessarily new, exciting data services, but really, really help AI make the most. So we saw earlier on Andrew showing the Google Street Map being processed. Here's some things I'd like you to think about. So digital traffic regulations are coming on board. That's the idea that instead of having a paper document hidden in a filing cabinet, you now have a machine readable regulation. So height, speed, weight limits. And those of you who've got intelligent speed adaptation in your car and it's bonging and binging at you when it's reading signs wrongly at the side of the road. Instead of using cameras, we could use data in vehicles. And parking and banned turns also. So in terms of can I move around this network? That's good fodder for AI to do things with in more clever routing. The second thing is digital twins. So there's lots of talk about the idea of building effectively models of all sorts of things in transport, being the utilities underneath the road through to the drone routes above it. I'm working on a digital twin of how a traffic controller works. So that's the grey box at the side of the road that tells signals to go red, amber and green. If we understand how they work and we put that with digital traffic regulations, we get a much easier way of modelling networks. And one of the key drivers for this has been talking to people who make models of networks about the idea of being able to get a digital set of rules of the road and a digital set of how traffic signals work. And we had got some good momentum with the national parking platform, which would be a single place where all rates and occupancy data for parking could be held. The private sector is now hopefully going to take that on board. That would avoid you having a phone full of parking apps because you could use whichever app you particularly wanted to do. So watch this space on that one. But I'd just like to highlight it's not just about real-time data. There's other data sources that we need to digitalise transport that are coming along as well. Next slide, please. So what's the role of AI in optimizing and planning transport? So I think I've said use big data to make better decisions. You've heard a lot earlier on from Andrew about large learning models. But the other thing I think is really important is every transport operations planning department I've ever met has got someone called Dave or Davina or Fred or somebody who knows everything, who knows the way things work, who knows how to operate the network when things go wrong. And I think there's an area there about the idea of not necessarily replacing people straight away, but replacing their knowledge when they go off and retire. So if I go to the next picture. So there's a fire hose of data that we're getting at the moment in transport. And what I think AI can do is to help you to distill that to a nice glass of Scotch malt whiskey. So if I could have the next slide, please. So our ask in terms of optimization, I think firstly, there's going to be a great drive, I think, to put lots and lots of money into new AI, particularly in optimizations. And I think I've given you a few good examples of some British SMEs that are already doing much good work. There are more I could have mentioned. There are more I don't know about. Maybe I should use AI for that. If you're in the point of using some of these tools, don't wait for research and development. There are stuff already on frameworks like G-Cloud and TTAS that are AI powered, traffic signals, for example. I think we're in danger of having too many pilots. My joke is that we've had more pilots than British Airways. Lots of this stuff we know works. It works well enough. Let's get out and use it. And if we're going to use pilot money, then let's focus on new frontier stuff we haven't done before, and new pushing the boundary type stuff rather than some of them all low-hanging fruit. And to quote from the AI report that came out yesterday, developers need access to high-quality data, the lifeblood of modern AI, and you would expect me to go on about data. So for the final one, please. So that's my contact numbers, and TTF website for more information about AI. We have a meeting coming up in April when the results of the February webinar that you've heard about will be talked about. So thank you very much. That's enough from me. Let's go into the Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andy. And so we've had lots of questions, which is brilliant. I will attempt to work my way through them. I've done a little bit of grouping, so I know that the whole panel will be able to contribute to answering those questions. So we're going to start off with, and apologies if I incorrectly attribute any of these as well. I'm kind of working through and trying to work out what we've got. But we're going to start off with a question from Rob Scargill, which is, in the opinion of the panel, will organisations that don't adopt AI tools in the immediate future be left behind? And he's noted that the transition in the next few years will be interesting, especially with things like local council organisations and local authorities starting to use them. So happy for anyone on the panel to kind of pick that question up.
I'll jump in, Catherine, and say, I don't think the answer is universally yes, actually. Now, like, all of my economic interests are in saying, yes, of course, you must adopt AI. It's incredibly important. But I think what's really important to do is think about what type of organization you are. So, for example, if you are a consultancy that does lots of face-to-face, in-person relationship building and consulting, like, it doesn't seem to me hugely necessary that you actually change your ways and adopt AI if that's really your competitive advantage as an organization. But I think for others, for example, if you are an organization that does a high volume of reports at a low price point, and then others start using AI and you don't, then that's something different. So I don't think you can say there's a clear answer. I mean, I think enough organizations will be impacted by this that it's really worth keeping an eye on what's going on, but you must think about what it means for your business or your organization. What are your goals, and therefore what approach you take to AI. Do not just jump on the bandwagon because everybody's talking about AI and you must be seen to be doing something about it. Think about the fundamentals, and then how you use AI should follow that.
I could add something there in terms of where the Department for Transport are revising the way that they allow condition assessments of the network and the past 2161 regulations going on, and that's designed to allow new technologies to come in and measure road condition generally much more cheaply for local authorities than the traditional methods. So that's an example of where legislation is changing to allow that. I mean, a lot of those technologies use AI to actually measure that. So I think that's the way things are moving, and it's a good example of how legislation is changing to allow that additional use of AI.
Yeah, I was going to mention what Robin just said in terms of changing legislation and requirements. The point I made earlier is ask yourself what problem you're trying to solve. If it, as Andrew says, if it requires human skills, socializing, consultation, those sort of things. If you are in terms of looking at more at the consultancy side, then certainly I can see that as being an area in which I know many of my clients and partners are already adopting. I also think in terms of some of the more mundane process type stuff, so answering questions, answering appeals for penalty charge notices, that sort of thing. Already industry starting to use that a lot, and that should free up time from, for want of a better word, drudgery, to allow people to do more of the stuff that they actually enjoy doing and less of the form filling and tick boxing, I would hope.
Okay, thank you. Another question on kind of the use of AI, probably stepping outside of industry, but as we know with any of these things, there is a very quick step from industry into kind of general use. And someone's asked a question about picking up from the comment that Robin made about digital divide. So whether there is evidence for or against the assumption that it might be older people, for example, that lose out, and whether there's a counter argument to that. So just some thoughts from the panel really on this idea of the digital divide and digital poverty, I guess.
Serious issue. Sorry, Robin, go on.
No, I was literally just going to say that there's something that would be really interesting to explore in the workshop we're having at the Transport AI, but I don't think we have any firm evidence for who's losing out. I think there might be an assumption that maybe older people don't use it as much, so maybe lose out. But if they're willing to try and exploit it a bit more, then maybe it could be a big benefit. Sorry, Andrew, over to you.
I'll give you a counter example. I run a charity called King Lear Arts, which is Britain's largest creative arts competition for older people, for retirees. And last year we ran the competition, we get thousands of entries, and we used AI to give people feedback on their short stories, on their paintings, and on their works of art. And we did a test, and we said we got some people to have feedback from human beings, and some people had feedback from AI. And then we tried to measure and see the value of those different types of feedback, if people could tell the difference. And generally, I would say 20% of people were furious that we'd even used AI at all, and it was a disgrace, and they never want to speak to us again. Then most people were sort of in the middle. They weren't quite sure, but they probably preferred a human. And then actually, there were about 20-30% who really loved the AI, because what the AI could do was give you 2 pages of feedback, whereas all we could do with human beings, because we had so many entries, was a sentence each. So it's just a small, silly example, really, but I don't believe there's any categorical reason why there should be demographic splits. It depends how you use it and if you can do it deftly and skillfully.
I have sort of slightly different view. I think, as was demonstrated earlier, if you make the way that you interact with technology easier, that will help everyone, not just elderly people, but everyone. I'm slightly worried, however, that we make the reliance on AI so great that people forget to do things like question themselves, pick up a book, read more than one newspaper, and so on. I could go on forever about that. One of the things I've seen in education is the idea that kids are coming into school now. They know how to swipe left and right in order to read something on a pad, but they don't quite know how to open a book and read it. So again, I think we just need to be really careful that we get that right balance. I don't know what the answer is, but let's just be aware of it.
That's a really good point. Thanks for that, Andy. That leads on quite nicely, actually, to another question we've had. So Ivo Wengraf has told us a story about using ChatGPT to plan for a road trip across Europe, which wasn't so successful. And so the question is really about how do you encourage people to use AI judiciously and not to be taken in by something that looks okay. And I guess leading on from that as well, there's also a question about whether there is a role for central government in imposing imposing standards and maybe mandatory real-time data sharing. So I guess how do we encourage the sector to really think about the quality of the data, I guess?
Clearly, these AIs, you have to be very careful with them. I think one of the most important skills in the next 5 years is going to be, how do you use an AI judiciously, and how do you check things, and how do you see what's right and what's not right? And if you think of the analogy of when the internet and Google searches came along, we could have had this conversation probably 15 years ago going, oh no, the internet, it's going to be terrible. You can find all sorts of rubbish on the internet. It's not as good as it's not as good as Encyclopedia Britannia. And of course, that's correct. And Wikipedia, remember all of that stuff. So we're going to have a similar analogous conversation, and honing that skill, not just for professionals, but also for youngsters and young people at school, like learning that skill of how to do it. And my best guess on how you get better at that, it's through experimentation, it's through trial and error for yourself. I don't think there's a really good sort of curriculum on that. So that's on accuracy. I'll leave the others to talk data standards.
Okay, so there's quite a lot of work being done about data sharing. There's a thing called data for road safety. I mentioned about digital traffic regulation orders all being in one place and shared. I mentioned about parking being in all one place and shared. I think the challenge with data is that people still see it somehow as being something that they worry about GDPR, they worry about privacy. Volkswagen's had a problem in the news recently about some of its data wasn't perhaps as less available as it should have been. I'm not sure if that's true, but these stories always gain momentum. I think the idea that we should sort of, for example, in terms of routing, Eva's made a really strong point that the route wasn't particularly good. But in the old days, you'd get a newspaper, you'd get a book, you'd get a road atlas to try and plan things. And again, we've had a few problems over the years with sat-nav routes not being very good and taking HGV vehicles down the wrong routes and so on. Again, it's this point about judicious use and so on. And again, we get lots of people where people say, oh, well, I drove down this road because my sat-nav told me to. You sit and remind them that the highway code still says you're in charge of the vehicle. I do wonder about the implications of that when there isn't a driver in the vehicle and we get to automated vehicles being routed in the same way as we have them now. But again, I think Andrew's made a good point, is the only way we learn this is by simulation, by learning, by testing, by experimentation. Those are the sort of new frontier things I think we should be spending time and money on piloting. But a lot of the stuff that we need, for example, for measuring road condition is available now. Let's not reinvent that one.
Actually, for the standards to keep up with the AI. So, I mean, we see about content online that Google or Facebook or whatever don't have can't keep up with monitoring or managing that content. And one sort of parallel example is drones developed very quickly, but the legislation sort of fell behind and couldn't keep up with that. And I think that's one thing. I work in Africa quite a lot, and where they're not sure about the legislation, they just say, right, well, no use. You can't use drones until we work out our legislation to control them. So that's going to be a challenge, I think, in the standards and legislation.
Great, thank you. We've had a number of questions looking for the panel's view on use cases for AI. So one's around, how can AI be used to develop sustainable transport strategies, particularly as Steve Spinks has pointed out, in a climate of disinformation, which I think is interesting. It's something that definitely a couple of the panelists picked up on. Also, whether AI could be the glue that supports and enables the government's plan for more integrated transport networks. And then Cormac McKay's picked up on a specific question around shared mobility vouchers and using AI to try and encourage positive behavioural changes over use of private cars. So I guess that the question to wrap all of that up is, it would be really helpful if the panel could just really talk a little bit about some of the use cases, particularly around sustainable transport and integrated transport as far as AI is concerned.
Yeah. We're starting to see people use it, sustainable transport. So we're starting to see people do things like scheme design and engineering in a generative way. We're starting to see people using it to create renders and visualizations of schemes, for example, even to generate sort of consultation materials to go out to the public and try and get them on side with things like that. I'm most excited actually about what will be some of the unexpected consequences of AI. So let me just play a scenario out for you. At the moment, if you want to get a decent size infrastructure or active travel intervention built, you need to get your local authority to pull together the design and the business case, and they probably have to pay thousands, if not tens of thousands of pounds to good folks to do that work and pull it all together and then get the funding, and then it'll get built. What if generative AI were to bring down the cost of some of that early design and feasibility work, such that a group of people in a neighborhood could do a GoFundMe and get together and democratically say, we want to put in a low traffic neighborhood in our area, or we want to put in a cycle lane down here. And by the way, here's the business case ready to go. And so you end up with these sort of, that may not be the one, but you end up with these unexpected consequences 2, 3, 5 years down the line, where suddenly it's not local authorities and sort of scheme sponsors being the tap on schemes. Actually, it kind of democratizes it. So there's just a bit of a thought experiment more than I think that's going to happen, but you'll see these unexpected consequences. So I think it's really exciting. Final thought on that is disinformation, sustainable travel, all of the people who are on one or other side of those debates will be trying to use AI for their ends. So I think it will make those extremes and those opinions more pronounced. I'm afraid that's not an optimistic answer, but I think that's what will happen with this new technology.
Yeah, I agree. We're going to get more and more diversity of opinion, where facts getting in the way of opinion don't seem to matter anymore. My answer about the sort of multimodal sustainable travel side, I think I've shown you that we're not just go out collecting data from cars, but cycle lanes, e-scooters, you name it. I did a project a few years ago which was looking at mud from construction sites as it came off tippers onto cycle lanes, because obviously you hit a big lump of gotty horrible mud and off you go. And that was just with processing people's cameras on that they used to show bad driving behavior. So I think, again, we just need to not think about just things with 4 black things on the corner made by Goodyear, Dunlop, etc. The other point I'd make about more sustainable travel is I think AI will open up a whole new vista. I'm thinking particularly about Evo's point about route finding. I've come to Guildford today. I could have driven and probably taken the park and ride. I came by train actually, which I regret. I think about the idea of stitching together journeys, stitching together different changes in terms of you could hire a cycle. I know Google Maps to some extent does that already, but the idea of opening up the full spectrum of different modes for travel, rather than just you have to decide what mode you want when you're doing a route plan. I think that'd be very interesting. And therefore, perhaps some of the challenges about park and ride, some of the challenges about hiring a vehicle might be removed. I think that the other thing is we've got to think of is in terms of that people move on them over themselves or stuff in order to do things. And again, coming from the point of view of what logistics, which always gets mentioned about halfway through a webinar, that we remember it. AI is used very much by the people who are delivering your stuff on the doorstep because it saves them cost. But also, I think in terms of the purpose of trips and so on, AI will start helping us to understand why we're moving and when we're moving in order to achieve what we want to do, rather than just planning as a journey.
Thanks. So I think the case study that springs to my mind is TRL have a test bed in Woolwich in London, where you can we've got lots of sensors and cameras in a sort of set area, and you can track vehicle movements, how vehicles interact with pedestrians, with other vehicles, with cycles, with scooters, etc. And AI is used in a lot of that, identifying the vehicles, tracking the vehicles. So car manufacturers, for example, will come along and test their CAVs and whatever in that test bed. So I think that's one sort of fairly practical use that's use of AI I can think of.
Great, thank you. We've had a couple of questions about adoption of AI from a business point of view. So someone's pointed out recent reports showing that some of the major AI providers like OpenAI, Gemini, and Anthropic face significant operational costs and profitability challenges. So what's the panel's view on risks and safety nets that companies should maybe consider before they invest heavily in becoming dependent on AI solutions? And are there any backup plans if service costs increase dramatically or availability becomes unstable, I guess?
Yeah, so I think two things. The interesting thing to say about OpenAI and Google and many of these sort of like the biggest AI companies is they're not actually that interested in making money right now from ChatGPT. These guys and girls are going for the big prize, which is some form of artificial general intelligence, which will have substantially more capability than what we see today. That's what they want to build, and they want to build it in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, that sort of a time frame. And all the money that's going in there is on the premise of when you have this super technology, it will then, and the idea essentially is it will become self-reinforcing. So we will learn what it's not doing well and it will get better and better and better. Now that's what they're playing for. So I wouldn't read too much into the current P&L profitability that's reported of those big AI companies. I don't think that's a good signal of whether these things are sustainable or not. Second thing I'll say is that to a surprising extent, what we've seen is really good competition between these different large language model providers. So if you've got Perplexity and ChatGPT and Google's Claude, you know, there's competition there and it's forcing down the price for the consumer. So I think actually the market dynamic to some extent is in your favor there. Final word of caution, as you should do with all software when you're buying it and all new technology, you want to look at what your exit options are at a later date. And of course, you know, software companies are looking at what they can do to keep hold of you forever and take your money forever, you know. So I wouldn't say it's any different from purchasing any other type of technology in that type of dynamic. You need to do it thoughtfully and carefully and think through where in a couple of years if you wanted to get out of this, how could you and how would you? And that's a fair question to ask a vendor. How could that work? Some thoughts.
I'd be hoping that's the sort of thing that people like Crown Commercial Services and so on are dealing with when they put services up on things such as G-Cloud, which might be an answer to one or the other question. I think there's enough, in my data world, there's enough suppliers out there that there is no kind of go-to supplier of any particular data type. There's redundancy, so you could use one supplier, and if they happen to not supply anymore, then their others would be available, slightly different, maybe slightly different standards, but it's not the end of the world. You know, Tesla hasn't made a huge amount of profit recently. It's never made any profit as far as I can see, but it doesn't stop people buying their cars. Don't seem to worry about what happens if Tesla goes bust. So I'm with Andrew. I think it's an area that you need to look at in terms of anything that you would do. Somebody's mentioned the point about the cost of energy in terms of data centers. I think that's something that cost of energy full stop. We need to think about whether it's a data center or whether it's warming my somewhat cold office. I think the point there in terms of there's some clever thinking in the AI strategy about putting data centers near where there are already lots and lots of electricity. I think there's Culham has been suggested as one, because that nuclear fusion reactors tend to use a few amps, I understand. I think the other thing that we really need to be careful of is the idea that we get ourselves so wedded into the way of working that, you know, I'm thinking in terms of big outages of suppliers and things like that, where lots and lots of services fall over because all of their single point of failure. All my engineering training over the years has been to look for single points of failure and try and remove them. And I think sometimes we need to remind ourselves of that. Have I got all my eggs in one basket? And if so, what would I do when that basket doesn't work?
Yeah, I think if I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, I mentioned the past work we did about we're doing about road condition assessment, and a lot of the 20 odd new technologies that are coming up, most of them are new, and some of them aren't even actually ready yet, but they've still applied for the trials to be accredited. So I think there's maybe not room for all of them in the market. So I'm guessing that one or two of them won't survive, but it'll be interesting to see how that pans out and how that competition works out. But I don't have any particular experience in existing models.
Okay, thank you. We've got time for a couple more questions. I am just going to thank Andy Graham. I understand Andy needs to drop off slightly early because of some train changes.
Yeah, AI didn't tell me about the trains that were being changed. So thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Please get in contact if you have any other questions, and I'll see you on the 5th.
Yeah, thanks so much, Andy. Okay, just picking up final few questions then for Robin and Andrew. I guess questions a little bit more focused maybe on Andrew, is just around the different models that you talked about, the different programs that you talked about. So ChatGPT, Notebook, LM, some of the other ones. What's your view on how they perform? Are they better at certain tasks? Are they broadly the same tool? And I guess, yeah, how have you find the comparison between the different models?
I had to choose an accounting software for my business the other day, and I drew up a little spreadsheet, and I went and looked at the features and the prices of all of them, and I did a nice comparison, and then I decided what I was going to go with and went with it. The problem with AI is it is moving so quickly that almost by the time you've done your spreadsheet and you've compared the three of the models, they've actually updated and moved on. So within each of those tools that I showed you today, the underlying models are being upgraded on, typically it's about a sort of monthly basis, but every week you'll hear new models being released. So actually this week, it could be that ChatGPT is fantastic at PDFs and Notebook LM is sort of less good. And so what I would, and this means it's very difficult for me to give you, I love to give straight answers. It's very difficult to give a straight answer of this today is doing this is better than this. I would encourage you to be deeply promiscuous in your use of these tools, especially the free ones, and almost have them up in the background and sort of even try a couple and see what the results are that you get for certain tasks. Obviously, we have a problem with our software. We plug into, typically we use OpenAI's models, and we have to make sure they're consistent over a period of time. So we, for our sort of specialized use cases for SchemeFlow, have to do a lot more evaluation and regular testing of, are these models stable and so on. But I'm afraid I can't give you an answer on use this for this, use this as this. Generally, Perplexity, online research more typically. ChatGPT also does PDF reading as well, as does Notebook LM. See what you like the feel of, see how they perform on the exact task you're getting it to do. Sorry, no straight answer.
I've only used ChatGPT, but I have to say someone sent me a really good blog on how to get the most out of it, and really context is everything. If you're prepared to write a few lines on what you want, why you're doing it, a bit of background, it gives you much better answers than just writing a single question into ChatGPT. So that's what I could say from that perspective.
Good point. I'm just putting a link in the chat to like a prompting guide, and a little bit of improving how you prompt these things. You can improve your results significantly.
Yeah. I think it's probably also worth saying, certainly from my perspective as a representative, if you like, of WSP, obviously, quite a major global organization, that our global governance is very strict on what we can and can't use AI for and which tools to use, because clearly they're generative and we need to be very careful about what information we put into them. So I suppose just an awareness that some organizations quite rightly will be restricted in how they use AI, and people looking at different solutions for doing that.
Yeah. And
be careful about plagiarism as well, because it can quote things which come from somewhere else.
We put in some like public documents, PDFs today, no problem at all. Imagine somebody, you say, put in all these HR records and summarize them, that's a problem. So yeah, thinking through how you use this judiciously again is very important. And often in larger organizations, council, if you work for a council, public sector organization, they probably have a policy on this. Check it before using it for your work. think it's still worth having a play on your own time on your personal computer with some publicly available information. I still think that's probably useful to do.
Yeah. Great, thank you. If you'll indulge me, I'm going to ask one final question. There are a few more in the chat, but I know that the chat will remain open, and a few more things can be picked up from that. I was listening to a debate on Radio 4 last night, following on from the government's announcement yesterday, and the question that was asked by the presenter on Radio 4 was the impact of AI versus the impact of the internet. And obviously back in the 90s, the rise of the internet, if you like, and the fact that the internet has now become all encompassing. What's your view? Interested here on both of you about the kind of comparative impact of the two, internet or AI. Which do you think is going to have the biggest impact on the way that we work and live our lives?
I will give you a straight answer, Catherine. I think AI brackets because of robotics. So because AI on the internet is great and it helps us do our white collar work faster and things we want to do on the internet faster and new capabilities, that's all great and cool. But actually the potential of robotics to which are heavily using AI to train robots to do the types of roles and functions that have been real world up until this point and the internet hasn't touched. I think that is going to be the thing that is incredibly transformative. The example of driverless cars is probably the best, the most obvious to people here. It's all very well doing lots of simulations and analysis and optimization on a computer, but wow, you've really got a car that's driving itself. You're in San Francisco and there were Waymos outside our house every 5 minutes driving past. It's really here. It's really happening.
I think based on the experience of AI since it's been openly available and how quickly it's moved on and improved, I think I would probably say the same. I didn't use the internet a lot when it first came out, but I think it was a fairly slow sort of transition, but with big changes. So I think I would probably say AI as well in terms of certainly in terms of the potential that it can do to transform the various sectors in the short term.
Interesting, exciting times ahead. Excellent. Okay, well, we'll draw it to a close there. Thanks so much, both to Robin and to Andrew for your brilliant presentations and the discussion afterwards. I really hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as I have. Juliana has put lots of prompts and links in the chat to various resources that we've talked through. I would also recommend again the conference on the 5th of February in Manchester, which is going to be really worthwhile, and obviously Robin's workshop at that event as well. So please sign up for that if you're interested. So I think that is probably it. I'll leave you all to the rest of your day. Thank you very much, and hopefully chat to everyone soon.